Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle. Hey there, it's Brad. As someone who's passionate about podcasting, I've always thought there should be more support for physicians who want to share their stories and expertise. That's why we're launching Doctor Podcast Network.
We're bringing together a community of physician podcasters with one goal in mind: to provide the tools, connections, and resources you need to grow your show. So whether you've been podcasting for a while or maybe you're just starting, we've designed this network to support you every step of the way, and we're going to help each other rise, not compete.
If this sounds like something you'd benefit from, we'd love for you to join us as we get closer to launch. So you can sign up at drpodcastnetwork.co for early access. Stay tuned for more details in the coming weeks. Really looking forward to what we can create together. Doctor Podcast Network, where doctors podcast.
Doctor Podcast Network, where doctors podcast.
Doctor Podcast Network, where doctors podcast.
Welcome back to the podcast. On today's episode, we have he is kind enough to be one of my referring doctors. He actually sends me patients, which is amazing. Although that's part of the reason I got connected with him. The other was I was on his fantastic podcast, the Pediatric Lounge, but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. So today's episode is actually a sponsored episode by Freed. So thank you very much for your support. And when I was on his podcast, he mentioned that he uses Freed. So it was perfect. So it all lined up. So that's what we're going to be talking about: how he chose Freed, how he's using it, and how it's working for him so far. So who are we talking about? We have Dr. George Rogu, who's a pediatrician with over 20 years of experience running a state-of-the-art pediatric practice on Long Island. He's the president of the only independent pediatric clinically integrated network in New York, and he's dedicated to providing high-quality medical care while ensuring that independent practices thrive financially in today's healthcare landscape, something that we at the podcast feel super passionately about. He's also the director of the New York Institute of Technology Medical Student Core Pediatric Rotation for third-year med students. And in addition to his clinical work, Dr. Rogu founded AdoptionDoctors.com, a valuable resource providing education and support to families navigating the adoption process. And as mentioned earlier, he is the founder and host of the Pediatric Lounge podcast. Dr. Rogu, great to see you, and thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me back. You make me sound more important than I actually am. But
you're being modest. You're being modest.
If you do it long enough, you'll have a list of things that you did.
Your CV grows. Exactly.
Yeah.
So what we're going to be talking about is how you chose Freed and how you've implemented it. But first, let's just get a little more detail about your role in your practice. So tell us a little about your practice and your leadership there.
I guess I'm the CEO of RBK Pediatrics. We have two offices, one in Comac and one in Bayshore. We run about 4 doctors in each office at the same time. We provide primary care when you want it, urgent care when you need it, services provided by physicians. 3 statements that every parent wants to hear. Primary care when you want it, urgent care when you need it, services provided by physicians. It doesn't get better than that. State-of-the-art practice, computerized, electronic everything, new website, rbkpediatrics.com. We have electronic healthcare records. Everybody does. That's yesterday's news. Today's news is other things that you have: patient portals, medical scribes, AI technology, prescribing. There's so much to medicine other than medicine. It's amazing.
So within the practice, you're the CEO. Are you also running all the technology for your practice, or do you have someone that you employ full-time or part-time, or is there another physician who takes the lead on that while you're doing the more global leadership of the practice?
I guess you end up doing a little bit of everything. Jack of all trades, master of none. I don't plug the computers in. I don't set them up. We have an IT company that does that for us.
Yeah.
I ordered the computers. They tell me what to get. When you're ordering a lot of computers, it's so easy to go to Dell and you order 10 of the same things. They're iCore 5s with more memory, with more RAM. Pretty simple. They upcharge 20% to order it for you. It's a big deal.
Since you're ordering them, you got to check out my old episodes on points and miles to make sure you're maximizing your points and miles when you're buying your computer. So make sure you're paying for those Rogu family vacations.
Yeah, we do that. people in the office, we call them up. Technology, part of it is not so complicated as it used to be. Back in the day, you'd have backup redundancy, T1 lines, servers in the closet, routers, and then you had the internet service also. Very complicated because when it would go down, you had to have a master's degree to figure out what went down.
Yeah, you're hamstrung. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it's pretty simple compared to how it used to be. You get the internet. If that doesn't work, the other internet works.
So did you choose your EMR when you guys went computerized?
That was an interesting thing. We used to have a really good EMR. It was touchscreen. It was very easy to use. I could get you trained in using it in about 10 minutes. Okay. It was so easy and intuitive. And of course, some big company took it and killed it and sunset the product, as they usually do.
Yes. When they do with they're doing that with physicians as well.
Yeah. And the CEO calls me up and says, we got being taken over, but we're going to put you into this really great product. It wasn't really great.
Actually, sure.
It was very complicated for pediatrics. I demoed it. I gave it a good college try. And then after 2 hours of demoing the thing, I went to the sales guy and I said, listen, not for nothing, but I cannot intuitively figure out how to strep throat test. And I'm not going to go further to ask you about different vaccines and vaccine logic and admins. This is ridiculous. There's too many buttons, many bells and whistles, very cumbersome, just like many of the EHRs today. So I happened to be looking at Office Practicum because I figured I started to see writing on the wall that it's a problem. And I was ready when the time was right. I already demoed it. I knew what it was. They just demoed it to me. And then I heard about it, that we were going to lose the product July 10th or 12th. And we were live with Office Practicum on Halloween. That's from decision to negotiation of a contract to training to paying and going live.
So that's what you're using now?
That's what we're using now, Office Practicum. It's a very good product. It's a super product for pediatrics. It's based off of templates. It has vaccination logic, the electronic prescribing, the patient portal, all the bells and whistles that you would need for a pediatric office. But what it doesn't have is that new AI technology.
Yes. Oh,
they're building it.
Great segue, George. That was a fantastic segue. So the next question is, how did you decide that it was time for an AI scribe? Like, how did you learn that it was a thing? And how did you decide, listen, it's time for us to implement this in our practice?
I have to give credit to a very good friend of mine. We just had him on the podcast last week. His episode came out today, Dr. Igor Trojan. We were at the Office Practicum conference last year, about April. And he comes over to me and says, George, I got to tell you about this thing. I said, what? AI technology for scribing. I said, you know what? I wrote the templates. I got medical students that scribe for me. I know the system better than the Office Practicum CEO. Why would I need an AI scribe? I walked away from him. The next day at the conference, he bumps up to me. He says the same thing. George, you got to look at this. I said, I know the templates. It's not going to make me any faster. Anything that'll make me any faster will be not walking into the room to see the patient. It's impossible. And then third day, he tells me again, but he struck a nerve this time. He says to me, George, you really should demo this, because why would you want to go through life knowing that I knew something that was successful and you didn't?
Okay. So there's some rivalry there, the Shelbyville of pediatrics.
Yeah, the formal stuff. And so I said, okay, let me try it. I downloaded a free version. They let you scribe 10 patients. And let me tell you, I was sold after 2 encounters.
Why?
Initially, just like many physicians, you'll say, you have to use 2 platforms. You have to use your EHR and you have to use Freed.ai. And you have to copy the HPI and drop it into the white box onto the EHR, copy the plan, and then drop it into the EHR. My initial thought was, if you're going to do that, why bother? Copy, cut, and paste. That's too much work. It really is not. And a very interesting story. So after I did that for a couple of cases, it gives you a nice summary of the visit. It excludes, if you're talking about a kid has an ear infection, how long he's been sick for, we tried all this treatment, and by the way, how was the soccer game last week? The darn thing knows to exclude that because it's not medical.
Interesting.
It blows your mind. If you try to understand how it works, you'll never understand it. You just got to go with it and let it go. My dilemma was, because as you mentioned, I'm the director of the NYIT Medical School, and I get 30 medical students that rotate. That's 10 a year. And I did say my medical students, they do scribe for me and they type, and I really don't have to do anything. My problem was, if I get this scribe, I'm not going to be able to teach the students. I'm not going to need them to help me anymore, right? I had my last student in April. He came in. We tried it together. We tried to figure out what to do. He tried it. He went in and he tried it. He sat down and he continued to type a little bit like he would, but we let the phone go with him. And then I would walk into the room like I always did, and he would present the case to me. I would say some stuff. We'd make an assessment and we'd make a plan and what to do. The thing just took everything that we talked about and made a nice complete summary and plan. Better. There is no way I could ever write such a note.
Yeah.
So it's good for progress notes. It's not 100%. It does have hallucinations.
I'm out to change that term because it's not a hallucination. It's a confabulation.
Okay.
Because it doesn't know the answer, so it makes something up to try and let you know, to fill in the blank that it doesn't know. That's the medical term.
My process is a very simple one. I download it onto my phone, the app, and I walk into the room. I put the phone down, and then I say, "How you doing, Mrs. Jones? What's Johnny here for today?" And we start talking the way you're supposed to as a physician.
Yeah.
You're doing your stuff, so that's the history of present illness. Everything in between, your problem list, your allergy to medication, your ordering of medication, and your physical exam is continued to be done in the EHR. Not a big deal. That's 4 clicks. And then you still have to make your diagnosis selection in the EHR. Not a big deal. And your CPT billing level. And I'm finished. I do the plan. I walk out the door. I put the kid's first name only, because you'll ask me, is this HIPAA compliant product? There's no identifying information. There's only the kid's first name, George. Then I go to my office where I stack about 3 or 4 of them at a time. So I just bang out a couple at a time. And I find George's chart. And then I open up the history of present illness, copy the HPI part of it, and I drop it into the HPI part of it of the EHR. I work on 2 screens.
Sorry, I'm trying to picture it. This is all happening on your phone.
No.
Okay.
I turned off the phone now. I walked out.
So the note's written on your phone.
It's thought about onto the phone.
So then how is it going from your phone into your computer?
Because you also have a desktop version on the computer that's open all day long.
Okay.
So then the accounts connect. The phone account connects with the desktop account.
Got it. So it's it's listening through your phone,
Correct.
but it's documenting on your computer.
It's documented in both, on the phone and on the computer. I think it processes somewhere in the cloud.
Got it.
And by the time I make it to my desk, the process already happened. I copy the HPI. I drop it into the HPI part of the progress note. I take the plan part of it, take 2 Tylenol and call me in the morning kind of stuff. If you don't get better, doctors all say this. If you don't get better, come back. If this happens, you should take this, and the other thing, and drink a lot of fluids. You would never write that stuff, and people would get dinged for that stuff.
Yeah.
So now that stuff is all taken care of.
And you can often bill a higher code because of all the stuff that you say, all these little side pieces of advice.
Yeah.
There might be another diagnosis code associated with it. There might be another level of medical management that you're now able to upcode, which means that probably, because last I checked, it was $99 a month, right? Yeah. And that's 2 upcodes for the whole month. Yeah. And not only is impacting your efficiency and your bedside manner, because now you're not worried about documentation because the documentation is all happening. Yeah.
You do get better notes. I'll give you an example of, I can tell which is a Freed note and which is a doctor note. The Freed note is actually really well done.
The way I use AI sometimes in my life is I'll write an email and then I'll put it in ChatGPT and I'll say, please make this sound more like an empathetic human. And it does a better job than me because I'm just trying to get the message across. I'm not trying to make it touchy-feely, but it's able to humanize the communication for me. So that makes sense.
But it does have some, like I said, it has some negatives. Like I got a complaint from a patient because I wasn't aware that our progress notes go to the patient portal and the patients actually read this stuff.
Sometimes, yeah.
So I got a call from the mother saying that you saw my kid for this, that, and the other. Not that it was a medical problem. And I said something to the effect that, and the sibling that's 4 years old has something. Yeah. Right? Do you know that the kid, that patient has no sibling that's 4 years old?
Oh.
Why did that happen? Probably we didn't hit pause. We didn't hit end.
Oh, and then went into another room.
We were walking out. The medical student started telling me about something else and picked up the tail end of that conversation.
That's not a problem with the EMR.
That's human.
That's an execution problem. So that's
An execution
that's
problem.
human error. Okay, I'm still trying to figure out the logistics. So what's happening is it's recording on the phone, right?
Correct.
Because phones inevitably have better microphones than computers. So
Mhm.
it's recording on the phone, and then it's uploading into the Freed on your desktop and your phone because they're both linked. And then what you do is you take it and you copy paste it. So what I do in my practice is I just carry my laptop with me and I go from room to room. So I try to close out the note in front of the patient before going to the next one. So what you're saying is I would copy paste the HPI into the HPI of the note, document my physical, go to the plan after describing to the patient what the plan is going to be, then copy paste the plan from the desktop. And meanwhile, my phone is just sitting there recording the whole time. How does it know when I'm going to plan? Or is it just continuously documenting the whole time and I need to figure out where HPI ends and plan begins?
Freed has boxes, right? It has the HPI box,
Got it.
the objective, and it has the subjective box that you don't really pay attention. I don't use that piece of it.
If you had a freehand type of EMR, then maybe you can dictate your physical exam.
Yeah.
But a lot of us have click boxes with our physical exam. So we wouldn't really use it. Yeah.
But it follows the SOAP notes, subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. So I take this part, and then I take the assessment plan part of it, and I forget about the objective part. But I do use the objective, like if I have a kid that I want to document that the kid, I know he doesn't have an appendicitis, I say, likelihood of appendicitis is low, has no right lower quadrant plane, negative Relsing sign, negative psoas sign, observer sign. And that piece I'll drop right into the physical exam. Or if I find something that's pertinent on the physical exam, I'll say it.
It's like a summary of your thoughts. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So when you were choosing, was it between Freed and a bunch of different ambient AIs or AI scribes, or this was the one that you heard about at the conference and the guy was sold on it? He was like, this is the bee's knees. This is what you should use.
It has all the bells and whistles that a pediatrician would need, or any doctor that speaks a lot. And I got really well versed in this scribe technology, and I started getting hit up by other people. Can you demo this? Can you demo this? Can you demo this?
Yeah.
So I started demoing just for kicks, just to learn. They're doing exactly what they did with the EHRs. They're making it more complicated than it really needs to be. If I can't turn on a piece of technology and use it instinctively within 3 minutes, I don't want it. If I have to take a course to onboard to learn how to use it, I don't want to use it.
Yeah, it's an iPhone and they're turning it into DOS.
Oh my God. I must have tried 10 other companies. Just last week, I got a student came up, there's this other technology. I said, let's try it. You put it on your phone, you keep Freed on your phone, let's do them head to head. After 4 or 5 cases, I'm using both. All came back to Freed. It just works.
Yeah.
Just like an iPhone. It just works.
It's because the CEO, his wife is a physician, and he wants her to be able to get home on time and not have to mess around with her notes. So he's got lots of reasons to make it work.
It's crazy how easy it is to use. And that's all I need.
So just for the listeners, Dr. Rogu is not being compensated in any way for this. Is his genuine experience with Freed. So is there anyone else in your practice that's using it?
I have almost all the physicians using it. I think we have 14 user licenses. I have 2 doctors that are not using it. Senior physicians, they're 67, 68 years old. You know, I went to one of them has conspiracy theory issues. She thinks the government's listening, so she doesn't want to have anything to do with it.
The government is not listening. No, but Mark Zuckerberg's listening.
Somebody's listening, so she doesn't want to get involved. Like, okay, fine. I'll respect. I leave her alone. I have another guy that was the topper in the practice. He's like in retirement part-time. He was always very fast. Whatever you put in front of him, he was fast. And he's still fast. And he says, why do you want to bug me with something new? Just leave me alone. I bang on more patients than any of these young doctors anyway. I write good enough notes. I know the templates. It works. Why are you stressing me? So I said, okay, let it go.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is every single physician will give you 15 different ways and reasons why not to use it. From templates to, it's just a well visit. You should, because everybody complains of how Mrs. Jones always comes in and the visit goes sideways. You know, I had about 3 suicidal kids.
Oh.
Filled out those PHQ-9s at the physical.
Yeah.
So they're slated for a physical visit. We do the entire physical. And you read the PHQ-9, they're suicidal. Now that becomes another encounter. That becomes another half hour of your life. You just became delayed in your schedule. So now if that happens, okay, tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
What's with
Now you're getting compensated for your time. Before you weren't getting compensated for your time, and now you are.
The time was done. I did the job.
Yeah.
But if your kid's suicidal, do you want me typing? Or do you want me looking at you? And
I see what
talking?
you're saying. You're going to be able to have a more empathic visit.
Correct.
And connect more because you're not behind the computer. You're looking the kid in the eye. You're making sure that they're being heard and felt and understood and cared about and all things that needs to happen in that visit.
And the problem came about because we did that. The patient left, you did your job. Now you had to go back to another computer and remember what in the world you typed and how to type something halfway intelligent, and that takes time. Now, let me tell you, Freed just picks it up. It gets me a nice summary of what I said and what was discussed, and our plan, and I'm done. I don't want to say life-changing. I would say life-altering. It is the best thing I've seen a lot of technologies come and go, different products. This is nothing like I've ever seen.
Finally, technology that works to our advantage and not to our disadvantage.
But they're messing it up already. Not Freed, but the other companies.
Also,
they help each other.
There are some practices that are like, listen, if you don't need to document, then that means you can see 3 or 4 more patients per day. They're using it to squeeze more work out of us, not to make our lives easier.
That's an employed physician's take on this.
Yeah.
They want to use that to make your life better. Get the garbage out of your way so you can go home on time and still continue to be a physician and do what you're supposed to do, not to type. I think it's good. With the physicians, the problem is, like I said, a lot of them will say, I have templates. I don't need it for a checkup. I'm pretty fast. Many reasons. So the way to get them to go on board is you give them an account. They use it for 10 patients. And then you take the account away because it expires. They'll come back and say, oh, can I get one of those? Can I get one of those?
It's the effort of learning something new.
Yeah.
Learning something new is hard, but they do everything they can to lower the bar to entry to make it easy.
There's nothing to learn. There really is nothing to learn. You turn it on, it's changing your process. You got to bring a phone.
Yeah.
You got to push a button because you got to put, so we're back to HIPAA. It's not HIPAA anything because it says George. I go to the room, I copy the stuff, and then I delete it from Freed. It's gone. Unless they hack my computer and they hack Freed within the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's not there long enough for it to really,
And there's no birthday, and there's no last name, there's no address, there's no identifying anything. It's just George came here for ear pain.
Fantastic. I don't think they could ask for a better evangelist for their product than you. So for the audience, if you're looking for an excellent pediatrician in Bayshore and Comac, New York, it's RBK Pediatrics. And if you're looking for another podcast to listen to, especially if you're a pediatrician or a pediatric specialist or subspecialist, Pediatric Lounge, find it where all wonderful podcasts are found. Dr. George Rogu, thank you so much for your time and all you do for physicians and your patients.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thanks for listening. I have a favor to ask. You listened to the episode until the end, which means you either fell asleep or you really liked the episode. So please share it or like it or comment on a social media post or write us a 5-star review, something. It would really help me out. And maybe what you learned from this episode can help someone else too. The views expressed in this episode are those of the interviewer and interviewee and don't represent the views of their employer or even their significant other. Even though the magic of podcasting make it sound like I'm talking directly to you, this is not a doctor-patient relationship, and this is not medical advice or financial advice or really any advice. Thank us again for listening to The Physician's Guide to Doctoring.